So I'm going to take you on a walk to a church in Norfolk, which has something remarkable on the inside. And whilst I do, I just want to tell you a bit about the lost settlement that I've been researching for the past few years. So the church I'm headed to is the Church of St Faith's in Little Witchingham, which is a small parish in Norfolk. And whilst I try and clamber over this fence, I just want to tell you a bit about the lost settlement of Guton. So somewhere beneath these fields there lies a lost medieval settlement, and like most lost medieval settlements, it's somewhere which has never been really investigated. There's been a few kind of small things, mainly the topographical county history by Francis Bloomfield in the 18th, 19th century. But aside from that, there's never really been much investigation into it. There's never really been much of a study. So I set myself this task a few years ago to produce this kind of study, bringing together everything we know about this settlement. So Guton was formerly an Anglo-Saxon settlement. It was founded at some point during the Saxon period, and by the time of the Domesday Book in 1086, the settlement gets recorded as Gutha Catuna, with 40 households and things like a mill, woodland, and then from 1264 it's actually given its own market and a fair. And you know, this is quite important because as you kind of look over these fields now, there's nothing really here. I'm just walking through the meadow, which would have been about 33, 34 acres, which would have been so important for these medieval communities. So I should probably explain why I'm walking 40 minutes away to this small church. It's because Guton, although it's a medieval settlement, it wasn't actually its own parish. It sat within the parish of Brandeston. And obviously, Brandeston had its own church, St Nicholas. But the church I'm walking to today is actually a church which is a little bit more interesting to have a look at, because it's likely one of the churches that some of the people who perhaps lived on the outer side, on the outer edge of the settlement, could have gone to and could have attended. Just coming out of the brambles now to see where the footpath goes, and incredibly lucky that it's been marked out for us to follow. One of the things I think people forget about Norfolk is it isn't entirely flat. You know, we've just walked out of the kind of meadow of what would have been Guton. We're kind of leaving that as a sort of valley which it sits in, and we're now walking up this, you know, slight incline, you know, to make our way to St Faith's. So as we kind of leave Guton now, and it's quite metaphorical, so we're kind of leaving Guton, heading towards Little Witchingham, I want to start to tell you a bit about why St Faith's, because I mentioned it, I said, we're going here, but why am I actually going there? What's so remarkable about it?
What's interesting is that Witchingham St Faith was always a tiny parish, and after the Reformation, it actually shared a minster with the nearby settlement of Great Witchingham. The church was largely neglected, and in 1851, only 15 people on average attended outside of the summer months. By 1791, it had become almost ruinous, and by the mid-20th century, there were elder trees and ivy growing inside.
Another footpath here. I think this one heads to Swannington Common, which obviously then leads down to Alderford Common, and then the Swannington Beck, the little stream, flows into the River Wensum, which then goes through the city of Norwich. So, as you can sort of hear the cars go past in the background, I'll just tell you a little bit more about this church as I can just see it in the distance. This is a church which fell ruinous, really, and is only looked after and protected because of the Churches Conservation Trust, which actually looks after a lot of the local churches around here and across the country.
It's said that the church was actually in such a poor state that it was being considered for demolition in the 1960s, but it was only in 1967 when the art historian Eve Baker climbed in through an empty window, began stripping the ivy, and found that the whitewash came away with it to reveal something hidden beneath.
We've finally arrived.
Her discovery led to the Norfolk Churches Trust putting in place a plan for repairs, with excavations in the early 1970s. The church tower was completed in the 15th century, with a battlemented parapet decorated with flushwork panels. The north wall you can now see is the oldest surviving section, built from flint and carstone, which is a local stone containing iron ore. As you enter the church, you see what Baker saw after removing the whitewash. One of the most complete schemes of medieval wall paintings in the country, dating from the middle of the 14th century. Here you can see the later Victorian font, originally from St Michael's in Whitwell, which overlooks the marketplace in the nearby market town of Reetham, less than 3 miles to the north. Here's the piscina for the priest to wash his hands in before the Mass, present in the South Isle. Perhaps the saddest part of St. Faith's story is the emptiness of the south wall, prepared for painting but never completed, likely as a result of the Black Death of the 14th century. Used to communicate messages to a largely illiterate population, without the work of Yves Baker and others, these wall paintings could have been lost to time. Luckily for us, they remain on the walls of this remarkable church.
So thank you for joining me on this short walk, this first proper video on my channel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Please like, please subscribe, all of those things people say. It really does help out as I kind of grow this. And I thought with this video, what better way to start with a walk? And, in later videos, I'll go a little bit more into this local history research and visiting other remarkable places like St. Faith's in Little Witchingham. So, thank you and take care.